Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the new pedal set from the guys at VNM Simulation. Out of the box, they look to be a heavy-duty set of pedals sporting a nice feature set. Time to put them through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. Let's take a closer look at this pedal set from VNM Simulation. Out of the box, this set presents very well. It looks like a professionally finished product. The fit and finish everywhere on these pedals is very good. I can't find any defects anywhere, any sharp edges, any blemishes in the finish anywhere. And this is an all aluminum constructed pedal, very thick side plates, but we'll get to the details of that in just a moment. So yeah, it just presents very well. Let's go ahead and get some of the specs out of the way before we get to really getting up close to the camera with them. The throttle, let's talk about weight. Throttle, 2 pounds, 7 ounces. And that's 1.1 kilos for everybody else in the world. And over here we have the brake pedal. And of course it's going to be a little bit heavier. It comes in at 3 pounds, or just over 3 pounds, at 3 pounds and half an ounce. And that's going to be 1.37 kilos. The clutch comes in at 2 pounds, 9.5 ounces, or 1.18 kilos. All right, so let's take a little closer look at the construction here and what's going on as far as how they're building this unit. First, we'll look at these massive side plates. Now, these are they're like 8.2, 8.3 millimeters thick. And they have these bevels on the sides here. Now, it's kind of beveled there. So I can get the light to show that. There it is. So it's not just a flat plate with a little bit of finishing on the edges. They've actually beveled all the way around there. And that follows all the way around the plate to the back. And of course, the other plate's doing the same thing. So very massive plates here, and that's for strength, obviously. Now we'll move over to the lever itself. The two upright pieces of aluminum here. Now they come in at 6 millimeters thick. And they have kind of a taper to them, kind of a stylistic little artsy thing going on there. Aesthetics. Yeah, get some point for aesthetics there. And of course, they have the same beveling. It catches the light as we turn the pedals there. And these brackets, this one's a little loose here. I've been playing around with this. The brackets themselves for mounting have these long slots in them, not too long, but long enough to adjust a little bit fore and aft. And these are also 6 millimeters thick. We'll go over to the pedal face itself, which is 5 millimeters thick. Now, these plates in the front of the pedal and these pivot points, and all of them are the same when it comes to this. You can see we have a series of plates in here that are supporting that pivot point. And some are a larger diameter than the others. And all of them are 3 millimeters thick. So that's what the pivot point is riding on. So good strength there. When I sit this down on the bench, there is no, I mean, these are a little teeny bit. I mean, there's got to be a little bit, or it wouldn't go back and forth. But there's just the faintest amount of sideways play. So they've really assembled these quite well. The pivot point itself are sealed bearings. You can't see the seals in them because they're covered up. And of course, you can't see the one over here because the sensor is on the side here. Now, these are Hall effect design sensors, so that means they're contactless. So we should get a lot of good life cycle out of this, unless there's something wrong with it right out of the box. But usually when they're good, they stay good for a while. And of course, they're sealed, so no dust will get in there, any contaminants. What else can we talk about here? We have adjustments, but we're going to go over adjustments in detail. But we have these stops in here. You see there's one here, and this feels like some kind of a urethane maybe. It's very stiff, but still a little bit pliable maybe. Anyway, it's a stop. And we have one on the bottom here, and you can see the bottom, these little two notches here resting against that. I believe that's where that's resting. And then we have a one on the top too, which is adjustable for throw. But like I said, we'll get to that in the adjustment segment. So when we're pushing on this throttle, it's going to be very quiet. Obviously, when it's mounted to the pedal base, it won't be clicking like it is going up and down on my bench here. And the return is also quiet. So this is going to be a quiet operating set of pedals from what I can tell so far. And very tight in here where we've got the pivot point. So already out of the box, it's very good construction technique and what they're using. So we'll know for sure once we have it on the rig and we're running it. We can see the back pivot point here. This little piece here is actually pivoting too when we're pushing it. So it's pivoting down this way, and is also on sealed bearings back there. Not shielded bearing, these are sealed bearings. I'll show you an example of that. On this little bracket they include in their damper kit. One of these, there we go. That's what a shielded bearing looks like, and that's what's in here. So these, I can't read the number on them, but usually are a little bit better quality and seal against dust and moisture and things better than just the shielded ones that had that little rubber seal around them. So we'll get back to this guy when we get to the adjustments. And again, this is a full-size control here. You can see my hand in front of the brake pedal here. This is a massive brake pedal on here also. So this is what I would consider to be full-size controls. The brake itself, we have a Maven 200 kilogram. I gotta watch these cables here. See if I can get you a look at that. Here we go. So that's a Maven 200 kilogram. And our bumpers are actually Fibrolast. It's the Fibrolast there, which is a industry standard type of elastomer. And they got a good reputation for being very accurate on the durometer ratings. Now these are the white ones, so these are going to be a little bit pliable. I can actually squeeze them a little bit on the brake. Of course, it's not under any tension here. And we have the spacer under here, and we can change and manipulate this stack with a brake improvement kit that they offer for this, but we'll get to that when we get there. And of course, the construction for the stop is the same. We have one on top down there, and we have one on the bottom. And of course, the same construction everywhere else. And you can see that this pedal lever pivot is not just held together by the side clamping of these spacers in here and this spacer back here. They're actually, the stack is pre-assembled. I don't know how we're going to see this. But see, there's a screw there, and there's also one there, and there's one over here. I got a total of 4 screws in these stacks that are tying them together with this lever before it's assembled into the bottom plate here. All right, and I'll show you this cord here in a minute when we get to the rest of it. Now they have a clutch pedal that has that feel to it, that as you're pushing through, now this is going to snap back, so I got to be careful what I'm doing here. So it's like pushing through the pressure plate spring assembly that's in a clutch pack in a real car. And of course, it's a lot of resistance at first, and then as we push through, the throw-out bearing engages, and yeah, then we can hold it there. I can hold it there very easily. I'm hardly putting any pressure on this, but when you release it, it's going to snap back. Okay, I controlled it pretty well there. So that gives you that feeling, at least on the bench and when you're sitting in the cockpit, of that pressure plate assembly working through it like you would with a real car. Now this is pretty stiff, so I might still be able to feel this when I'm doing a toe, or rather heel and toe shifting technique, but we'll have to wait again until we get there. And this one has, of course, a little bit different construction, and it has the same over 8 millimeters. Boy, these things are going all over the place. It has the same over 8 millimeter plate here for this little upright here that's holding the bracket for the clutch. And of course, all this is adjustable. You can adjust it up or down here. You can even slide this up and down to get an adjustment on it. So yeah, it looks like we got a lot of adjustment in that. And of course, we have the usual stuff here, but we'll talk more in detail of that later on. So yeah, again, everywhere you look here, I'm trying to find something wrong here. I can't. Now, the cables themselves have these little 4-pin connectors, and these are metal, and they're going to connect to our controller box. We'll see that in a second. So nicely done here. You can tell that they're going for the upper tier of pedal sets in the construction of this set right here, because everything's just, like I said, I can't find anything that I really disagree with here yet. And there's a little clamp there, a little cable guide. Keep the cable out of the way here and keep it coming straight back so it doesn't get hung on anything. All right, so that's a closer look at the pedal set. We have a controller box that comes with the pedal set. Now you can also get some other stuff with the pedal set. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Now this is an aluminum enclosure, and this warms my heart when I see a manufacturer delivering their pedals with this. Instead of a naked circuit board hanging out in the air with a couple of pieces of plexiglass around it, and yeah, no shielding element there. Here, it's not perfect obviously because there is some holes here, but having metal around the electronics helps mitigate EMI, right? So any external EMI generated by your direct drive wheelbase or whatever it is you may be running for motors, this helps mitigate that because it's not as easy to get to the electronics going through a metal enclosure as it is plexiglass, as you might imagine. As you guys may know, I'm always harping on the fact that all manufacturers should be using this technique for any controllers that they're making. So we've got some etching on here. It feels like etching because it's actually deep. It goes into the finish. You can feel it, the indentation there. So some kind of a etching they're using for the labeling on here. We have connectors for the brake, the clutch, and the throttle. And we also have one up here for the handbrake. So if you have their handbrake, you can plug it into here, which I actually have. And we also have on the other side a USB-A interface instead of like a C or a micro or something like that. We have a switch here on the side. It moves up and down. When you have an up position, it's the normal run position. And if we take the switch and move it down, it puts it in what they call DFU, which is really bootloader mode. So you can do any firmware updates down the road as they come available. Leave that and run. Yeah, I like this. And it's got some holes in here. They have some threads in there. And that's for mounting this to their pedal baseplate system. It has a heel plate in it too that I have. And I'll be doing that through the review. I'll be showing you guys that. So let's see what else we got. With just the basic pedal set, you get your cable too. And this is a USB-A to USB-A. Nothing special looking here. Just, no gold plating, no ferrite cores or anything like that. Just a cable. And it's branded as U Green. Show you a little branding there. All right. So that is your 3 pedal set and the basic components you'll get when you get one of these 3 pedal sets. What we'll do next is start looking at some of the optional things that you can get with your pedal set. Let's go over the pedal dimensions real quick. We'll go with the throttle first, and from the bottom of the plate down here, the mounting bracket, to the top of the where it's sitting now, and this is in the middle of the adjustment range, and we'll get to the adjustments later on, but that's around 276 millimeters. We'll go over here to the brake, and we're looking at about 200, about the same, well, maybe a little bit taller. But again, it's going to vary a little bit by millimeter. I'm looking at 280 really here, but it's going to vary because we can actually raise these up and down. And over at the clutch currently, we're looking at about the same as the brake, 280 millimeters. Now, the length on the clutch is, and I'm going on the brackets down here, is 177 millimeters, it looks like. And these are probably, are they going to be the same? Yeah. 177, 177. So all the lengths are the same. Yeah. And the width's also probably going to be the same because remember, this stack in here with all these bushings is the same stack in each one of these pedal lever assemblies. And that comes in at about 95 millimeters here. And yeah, 95, 90. So all these are the same width. Now the pedal faces obviously are going to be a little bit different. We'll start with the clutch over here, and this comes in at 70 millimeters, I believe these were. Yeah, 70 millimeters, which is the same width as the throttle over here. Now the brake face is pretty massive. It comes in at 90 millimeters wide, and we're looking at 120 millimeters on the height of it. So obviously pretty massive. A nice big surface there for braking. We'll go over here. And yeah, this is going to be obviously the longest one or the tallest one, 170 millimeters. So there's the basic dimensions. So if you're considering putting them in your cockpit, make sure your cockpit has enough room as far as the height goes to handle these. Now we'll take a quick look at the brake upgrade kit that is available from VNM. And this gives you more tuning options, obviously, than just the stock brake, which has pretty much a preload adjustment here, and yeah, it looks to be just about it. So what do we have? Well, instead of the spacer here, we have these springs that you can install. And these kind of look like, to me, if you've ever had a head of a motor open and adjusting valves or replacing valves or doing a head job, as they say, then you will see these kind of springs. Now this is the red one, which is the stiffest one. And we have a blue one, which is less stiff. And we have a yellow one that is the least of the stiffs. And I'm going to hold these up here because you guys, it's pretty easy to see this as far as the thickness of the coils in these springs. You can see it right there. The red's pretty thick, and the blue, and then the yellow. And these will go, according to their directions, replace the spacer back here. And this is going to give you a more lively brake pedal. In other words, something that has, this has a little bit of play in the front here that you can adjust. And that gives you kind of that real brake pedal feel to where it moves a little bit before it actually engages the master cylinder piston and starts pressing, and then it really gets stiff. And of course, it depends on what kind of hydraulic system you have and what kind of car it is, that kind of stuff, as far as how stiff that's going to be. So we would take one of these and put it in the place of that spacer. We would leave these guys in there and do that. I'm going to play around with that a little bit and see what it does. Now also, this spring up front here that gives us that little bit of movement, depending on how you have it set up. And of course, that's going to be adjustable, but we'll talk about adjustments in a little bit. We have a thicker spring here that can go in and replace that one. That, again, is part of the kit. We also have another fibrolast, which we can put in here, like this. Now, the picture on their website actually shows a green fibrolast also. But my kit did not have that in there. But it looks like that's what they're putting in the kits now. And that's not surprising because sometimes I get pedal sets and they're in current production evolution for some of the little tweaks. And yeah, so instead of that, they gave me this. Well, actually, this is supposed to come in it too. It's not extra. So that's a spacer too. So I can actually use this spacer in this with this stack here. Anyway, that's what the brake upgrade kit consists of. So not a whole lot there, but it does give you obviously some more options to how you want your pedal to feel. VNM also offers a damper kit. And these are gas charged pistons that you can get in the kit. And they fit to the throttle, the brake, and the clutch, all three of them. Now these are gas charged, so they don't just go in and out as a damper. If you press them down, they go back up. So they are spring loaded, and they have these little dials down here that will allow us to adjust what that's going to be. And let's see, let me push this down. That's pretty easy there. Yeah, it's getting tough there. But it does have that gas return. So it's always going to be pushing the pedal back towards us when we have these on. And of course, depends on what you want to feel. Now, I'm a fan of the damper kits that come on different pedal sets. The only thing that I always question is the damper kit that they put on the brake pedal. Now remember, you still have to move the pedal at a certain distance to be able to feel what this damper is doing. I mean, without it moving a little bit of distance there, you're really not getting much damping effect. So I've always questioned the use of it on a stiff brake pedal. Now, if you got a lot of movement in your brake pedal, then fine. But where they do shine is on the throttle the most to me, and then the clutch would be the second as I'm using the clutch. It just gives you a more fluid analog feel to the pedal. Takes some of the digital feel out of things when you're using these pedals. I've always felt that on just about every pedal set that didn't have some kind of a damping in it. At first, before I started tuning them, they always have that, you know, it just doesn't feel like a real pedal feel. But this, for some reason, these dampers do it for me. Now, not everyone's going to agree with that, but that's okay because it's very subjective at the end of the day. I would recommend them on the throttle and the clutch at least on the throttle, because it really is going to give a nice fluid feel to it as you're pushing it and it returns back to you instead of just a spring. And if you've ever had one of these added to a spring or instead of a spring, then you know what I'm talking about. Now, the ones that go on the clutch and the brake are these guys, these thin ones. And they go into these pieces here, which will attach to the back of the pedals. And I'll go over the installation of these in another segment in this review. And of course, there are threads all along the body of this damper. And they will screw into the centerpiece here, like so. And that's how you're going to adjust where you want this length to be. They also include these 3D printed spacers that once you put these things in the front pivot points in the front of the pedals here, and again, we'll get more detail on that later, you use this as a spacer to set it up. I'm assuming that that's what it's for, set it up, and then you'll take it back off and then run it without it. So that's just make sure that you get the right spacing, and yeah, you don't get anything all binding up on you. Also, these pieces that are attaching to the rear and have the pivot elements in them, these are 3 pieces, separate pieces, and they come apart and you just got to put them together. And it consists of this piece here, just a pivot piece, then it has these little posts in here that are very smooth and have a bush impressed on them. And then of course we have these sealed bearings here in these brackets, and of course they just fit nice and tight. Good tight fit there, good friction fit, so it's not going to come loose. And yeah, very, very fluid, nice movement there. And we have a set screw that once we have it screwed in where we want, we're going to use the set screw. And you do get some set screws in the kit also. We have a set screw in this one and this one, and they are nylon tipped set screws. Instead of taking one out, I'll use the one we have in the throttle. I'll show you the throttle here in a second. But it's nice, it's not just a regular set screw that's going to go in and possibly crush the threads that are on the damper bodies. So they've included these guys. Well, that's a different one. Where are they? There they are. And they have these little nylon tips on them. See it there. So that's going to keep you from messing up your threads. Put these back in here because we don't want to lose them. And there's a couple of regular grub screws in here too. And we'll talk more about those later when we're doing the actual setup. Now this is the one for the throttle. Now when it comes to the throttle, we're going to take this whole assembly out. And then we're going to replace it with this, which has, again, another spring and a little retainer, little washer set up there on the top and on the bottom here, the same kind of thing. This is adjustable, and that's going to give us our preload. And of course, the damper itself is adjustable down here. We can turn this back and forth and get the feel that we want out of the damper. Looking forward to changing this one out. In fact, I'm going to drive this first with a regular spring in it, and I'm sure it'll do a fine job. But this is just going to give you another dimension to the feel of the throttle. And these are heavy-duty units. These are not cheap looking. And of course, being gas charged instead of just a regular damper that once you push it in, it doesn't push back out like these do. I'm going to actually see if I can slow this down a bit. Push it down. Nope, it comes out pretty quick. Anyway, once we have these in and we're using them, I'll try to describe to you guys what the differences are. So yeah, these come in different sizes too. We have a shorter one and a longer one. I'm not sure which one's the brake and which one's a clutch, but we'll sort that out in the directions once we get to that point. But yeah, this is just an accessory that you can use to improve the overall feel of your VNM simulation pedal set. So now let's go over the adjustments on the throttle pedal. Now, some of these adjustments are going to carry over to the other pedals because they're the same thing, and I won't be repeating those when I do those pedals. All right, first we'll talk about pedal faceplate adjustment. And you can see on the face of this pedal, there are no holes here. These are just dimples that are machined in, a little bit of styling going on there. And these 2 screws will never move unless you want to completely remove the pedal face itself. And you can see it's riding on a block back here. And there are some slots in the upright or the lever part of the pedal that allow it to move up and down. We got 2 bolts on each side. These are button heads. They are, I believe they're 3mm. Got 2 over here. Again, all stainless steel hardware. This is a pretty simple thing to do, or at least it should be. And that's just to loosen these guys up so that we can slide this up and down. So I'll do that real quick. Again, very easy stuff here. I should be able to push this up and down now. I got them all loose. And I can. And so that's just the height adjustment, depending on where you want the height to be. Because I use heel and toe a lot in my demonstrations, I'm going to want this to be kind of low so that when I'm on the brake pedal with the tip or the ball of my foot, I can rotate over and catch that throttle. So I'm just going to leave it down towards the bottom. I may change that a little bit once I get everything mounted and then I'm using it. It'll make the difference then. So it's kind of hard to tell what you're going to do when you're just sitting on the bench showing things. So we'll tighten these guys back up. And one more over here, I believe. Is the top one? Yeah. Easy enough, right? Now we have 2 adjustments we can do here, and that's for the amount of effort it takes to push the pedal. we have one here, which is the preload on the spring. This is what I call the fine tuning piece. And we have another one here, which is a slot. And a lot of pedals do this. There's a slot in here. So the higher I raise this bar or this piston, or whatever you want to call it, rod, the higher it goes, the higher the fulcrum point moves on my lever here. So it's going to make it harder to push it in general. The lower it goes, the easier it's going to be to push. Now, this one has a bolt going all the way through it, stainless steel bolt. This is a socket head cap. So it goes all the way through to the other side, and we have an M8 bolt. Not an M8, but an 8mm size bolt over here. And they both have washers. So we have to loosen that up. So I have a 4mm over here. Where's my 4? There it is. And then I'll be using this for the nut, 8mm nut. And it's just a matter of getting on both sides and loosening it up. And then we're going to move it to where we think we're going to want it to be. And once it's loose, it starts to raise up when I move it. Now, again, all the way down, I'm going to hold this with my finger on the other side. I can tell that's pretty easy to push, even though I do have some preload on the spring. Now, if I raise it up, it definitely becomes a lot harder. So this is a greater move in resistance when you adjust this part than this one. This is a fine tune. So I'm going to get that about in the middle. Now, one thing about this, when you try to tighten these up, anytime that you have a spacer, like this one here, and you want to tighten it up, and if it's in a slot, it tends to want to walk around on you. So it can change its orientation in the slot and be kind of frustrating when you're trying to tighten these things up. But if you take both of these pieces at the same time, and I'm going to turn this around this way, and I'm eyeballing this, and I'm going to tighten them both at the same time slowly until I can get it not to move. And sometimes you can tighten one side, this side over here or this side over here, easier than the one side or the other side, and keep it from walking. Like this one, now I'm turning the nut and it's not moving over here on this side. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep it right where I want it to be until I get starts getting stiff there. Then I can put some pressure on this one and go ahead and cinch it down. So I'm going to leave it in the middle like that. And that feels pretty good. And if it's too tight, again, I can come in here, a nice little knurled nut that they've machined here, and it has a piece or a section that is hollowed out behind it, so it captures the spring, so keep the spring from flopping around. So depends on what you want. Now I can come in and I can fine tune it by loosening it. It feels pretty good, or tightening it back up, and you can tell the difference. So that's a fine tune. So that's what we're going to do as far as how much effort it is to push the pedal. And of course, that's going to change once I have it mounted. Just like anything else I'm talking about with all these pedals, it's going to change as soon as I get it mounted. I'll probably end up putting more force on it. That's typically the way it goes for me. Now we have a cool section here. And this is the top stop. See that blue piece there? And what that does is stop the travel of the pedal this way. Now, depending where you want that, short stroke, a long stroke, and that can also change depending on the car. Some of these cars in simulation, they have very tricky throttles. They're very sensitive. So the longer stroke you have, the easier it is to modulate. At least for me it is. So I usually want a longer stroke on those kind of cars, but you don't know until you're actually doing it. But this is how we're going to adjust it. Now, again, back to this cool little thing they've done here to reinforce this. No matter how hard I jam on this pedal, this is not going to move. It's sitting in a slot. And you'll see that better once I get this off. So it's sitting in a slot in here. So I'm going to adjust it back and forth. And of course, if I adjust it further back, I'll get more travel in the pedal. If I bring it forward, then I'll get less travel in the pedal. Pretty simple. But this is a cool little locking mechanism that first time I've seen this on a brake pedal, or rather not a brake pedal, but a pedal. And yeah, so what we have to do is loosen that up, obviously. Now the back one, I don't have to worry about holding the other side because it's actually just in the plate here. And another advantage of having a thick aluminum plate like this, by the way, is that we can actually put threads in this, and it's thick enough at 8.25 millimeters that I can torque down on a bolt in there and not worry about stripping it out. Now, if this was a stainless steel type of pedal set, typically they are much thinner, like 3 mil or something like that. And you put threads in that, and you start torquing down on it, because there's not that much thread surface area because of the thinness of it, you could strip it out. So that's why you see a lot of the stainless steel pedals, they're thinner, they all use spreaders. No matter what we're connecting here, there's always a spreader bar in there with threads in it to keep it from stripping out, because obviously the threads in those bars are going to be deeper. Now, I'm going to go ahead and loosen this one up. And then I'm going to try to loosen this one up without the other side turning, but I got a feeling that's not going to work. Oh, it did work. Okay. And I'm going to go over here. You saw me, I snugged it back up a little bit because typically you have to do that to break the other side loose. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So the other side won't break loose. Let me get my other 4mm wrench. And now what you do is you come back and tighten the one that broke loose first. Get it tight. And once you snug that back up, you can kind of use a snappy move to try to break this one loose. Didn't work that time. Let me tighten it more on this side. Oh, there we go. I think that did it. And the principle behind that is what usually works. It doesn't always work, but usually works that way because once you break one side loose, it kind of comes loose easier the next time you want to twist it loose. But we're going to, yeah, see now I had to put too much pressure on it. So now I'm fighting that. This is the thing that I don't like about these setups is when you're taking them apart, putting them back together is easier. But when you take them apart, it tends to, yeah, it tends to be not as easy to get these things loose. And get them both loose at the same time, which finally I've done. All right, so now you can see this is moving back and forth. And not only that, but our piece here is flopped down because it's loose. In fact, I need to go ahead and loosen this one if I'm going to make an adjustment. There we go. Now this one, I'm going to kind of rotate back. And the reason I did that, because we have a cable on this side. And it tends, because I've done this before, it tends to want to drop down behind that cable. And you got to push it back up and try to get it back on this. And it's easier to come back this way with it. All right. So again, pedal travel, right? How far is it going to go as far as when I press it? And I can have it very short, like this. There's a touch in there. Or we can have it way back to where it was before. I don't know where I'm going to want it. So I'm going to actually try to get this to go in the middle. Now, I find middle's usually where I like to start with things. And then I'll go from there depending on what it feels like, right? And again, it can vary from car to car too because of how tricky or sensitive a throttle is on that car. Now, what I'm going to do is come back over here and tighten these up. And again, this is where it gets a little tricky. It wants to walk on you when you tighten these things up. And I'm holding it over here and I'm watching it to see if, and the thing is, depending on which way it's going is which wrench I'm going to hold still. That's the way I do it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can snug this up without getting it moving on me. It seems I'm doing it. I'm just holding this one still right now. There we go. So now that worked, all right? So it didn't move on me, and now I can go ahead and put some more torque on it. Don't have to torque the heck out of it. Just want to make it good and snug, because remember, I don't have to worry about this slipping because of this cool piece that they put in here, like this. So now I've got to get this back on here, all right? So if I back this all the way up in the slot, it'll pass over it. Now, if I had this all the way back, it wouldn't do that. But all I have to do is loosen this, take it all the way out if I want, or get it loose enough to where I can get an angle. See, I can get an angle on this. Sorry, the best way to show you this. It's flat there, but I can actually get an angle on it now that's higher than the socket head cap and get it over it. So that's another way to do it. So then I'm just going to put my finger behind here as I tighten this 4mm sized socket head cap. And there you go. Now, when this is tightened down, obviously there's no way for this thing to move backwards. Move forwards, but maybe if it was loose. But it's not going to move backwards. So you can pound on this as much as you want. I really like the feature that they put on that. Kind of clever, I think. So then I'm going to go over here again because I turned it this way because, again, it would have gotten stuck in the cable. Now it's easy enough for me to just come around, and I have enough slack because it's forward. I don't have to worry about lifting it up. And then I'll use gravity to kind of tilt it this way so I can hold this at the same time and tighten that down, and we're done. That's how you do that stop. Now we also have a stop on the bottom here, and that's the return stop, and that will have some play in what's going on with the angle of our return, where it stops at. And you can see it's kind of straight up right now, which is where I like it. So if I wanted to, I could come in here, and again, it's just the same stop that we had on the top. You can see it on the bottom there. There's some channels in here. There's channels on either side that allow this to move a little bit back and forth. Not too much. It's still limited to how much we can move it in the little slot that's in here in the side plate on this side. So there's a little bit of movement there. And what you would do is loosen this up. Pretty simple. And then once it's loose, then we'll move this back and forth to where we want it to be. And we'll be watching the angle over here at the same time. And then once we have it done like that, we can go ahead and tighten it back up and get the angle we want. But remember, a trick to do that is to take all the preload off of this, so it's a floppy pedal like this. So the pedal's kind of flopping around because you don't want the tension pushing it back against you to hit that stop and change it while you're trying to tighten it back down. That's all. And then once you're done, again, just go ahead and tighten this back down. Hold the spring up. Make sure it's getting in the recessed part of our little tensioning nut like that. And then you're good to go. All right, one more adjustment. And this is common with all of them. And that's going to be, again, another way to adjust the angle. And that's by rotating the body towards us. And of course, that's going to rotate like this and change the angle, which is probably the easiest way to actually change the angle. And if you want to fine tune it, then I'd go down here and mess with this stop, I think. So easy enough. Again, we don't have to worry about any kind of holding on both sides because remember, again, this huge thick plate here they're using for the side has enough room or depth to it to give us a good thread area in here to where we can torque down on something, not worry about stripping it out. And again, we're just going to loosen this 4mm hex here. Actually, it's pretty tough, so I'm going to use this guy over here. When it's hard, you use these. This is just for getting things snug. Go ahead and rotate that. Pretty simple. And then we would have to pull this all the way out to do that. Now, if this was mounted to my cockpit already, then, you know, not a big deal because then I'd have this side off too and just rotate them at the same time. You may have to loosen the fronts up to get it to rotate, but then you tighten them back down when you're all done. An easy enough adjustment here. And you can see another bit. What is these? This is like the same thickness, isn't it? This is a little bit thinner. Yeah, I think these are the 6mm. But anyway, it was in the third one, which is kind of where I want it, sitting flat. And that's where I'm going to want it on my rig, but I could change the angle very easily, as you can see. I'm just going to put it back in that slot, or that hole. And by the way, no slots, just holes, which I also like because that's going to keep it from slipping. Slots, they always tend to slip, especially if you're using aggressive pedal technique like I tend to do from time to time. All right, so go ahead and get that started again. And when I'm tightening it down here on the bench, I'll make sure that I put it down flat so it stays flat where it needs it to be. And I'm simply just run this back in. Tighten it up. Drop my wrench. That's okay, I don't need it. Because I'll probably be messing around with this again once I get them mounted to the rig and get everything fine-tuned as far as the adjustment position. All right, so there are the adjustments in our throttle pedal. Now we'll take a look at the adjustments available on the brake pedal. Now the stock brake pedal setup out of the box comes like this. We have two fiberglass bumpers in there. We have a solid spacer here, and we have a 2.5mm thick spring. Now the only adjustment they give you is going to be this guy here, which is a 3mm spring. So you can put that behind this one or replace this one with this, which will obviously make it stiffer. But out of the box, that's really the adjustments that you get. Now, you can get an upgrade kit, which consists of different strength springs. We have a light one, a hard one, and a really hard one. And they are yellow for light, blue for medium, and red. A finger out of the way there. You can see the difference in the coil thicknesses there. The red's going to be the stiffest. And you can put that up here if you want, or back here or somewhere, wherever the stack works out where you need it to. They also include another fiberglass that you can put up in here. Now in their picture, they're showing a green one also, not just a white one here. Now the white one is softer than the green one. Now I just happen to have a green Fiberflex. Pulled it out of my parts bin, left over from all the years that I've been doing this kind of thing. So I can employ this and try that if I like also. But you should have that in the kit according to the picture on their website. You also get a spacer in the performance upgrade kit. So I think what I'm going to do is use it without any of the upgrade stuff first, and then try maybe a different bumper then, because if this is going to be a little bit light, I think, for me. You really can't tell till you get it mounted and you're using it, but I don't know what it's going to be. But it's pretty easy to switch all of this stuff out. We just have one bolt right here to take out. Now, we also have some other adjustments for angle and for the stops in here, but if you go look at the throttle adjustments segment that I put in this review, that covers all that stuff. And of course, the face of the pedal here is adjustments. So go watch that, and that covers all that stuff. No need to do it twice. Now we have a 4mm stainless steel socket head cap bolt here with a washer, and on the other side we have an 8mm nylock nut with a washer. We just pull that out. Now, before you do that, you're going to release all of the preload that you can so that you don't have a lot of pressure on this bolt when we're trying to pull it out. So I'm going to turn it counterclockwise if you're looking this way and loosen it all the way up as far as I can go. And there it is. Hopefully that takes enough pressure off of it. And then we'll go ahead and remove this. So it's a 4mm over here and an 8mm little wrench over here. And just spin it off. Okay, there's our nut and our washer. Yeah, I didn't lose any of them. This is that little nylock nut. And we got a little washer behind it there. Don't want to lose that. And we should be able to push that. Yeah, it's going really smooth there, so there's not a lot of pressure on it. If there were, you just take this and kind of push it up like this as you're wiggle it around or whatever. Manipulate it as you're pulling everything out of here. And you might even want to twist it while you're doing it. It would help take it out also. Of course, we have to wait and see how easy it is to get back in, won't we? So now it's just going to rotate up. Get it to rotate up here. Or I guess it doesn't rotate up. Not, yeah, I was thinking about it. It says rotate up, but really what I want to do here is just pull the whole thing forward, it looks like. So I'm going to do that. The whole stack forward a bit, and hopefully I can get it out. Yeah, see how we just keep tilting it up and the whole thing will come out like that. All right, there we go. And so there's our stack. And you can see that we have a sleeve inside of 2 steel sealed bearings on either side. There's a little logo etched into the block here. So yeah, at least I'm going to stay with the stock setting first. I'm going to go as hard as I can, which would mean replacing that 2.5mm thick spring coil with a 3mm. So I'm going to replace that. And you can see we have a very thick steel bar going in there. And I will just insert everything back in like it came out, keeping the stack straight. You want to make sure you get that bottom piece on correctly because there is a bit of a little notch there, or raised section. It's going to fit down into, I'll show you that while we have it open, our load cell. Well, if I can get it up here and show you that. Well, I can show you this way. Here's the hole. So it's just going to fit down in that hole. You want to make sure you have that on there or it won't center everything. It'll be flopping around. All right, so it's just the reverse of what we did when we took it out. So let me spin this around. And I will kind of start. I'm going to make sure my V is in the right orientation. And just kind of slide the front down and kind of use a twisting motion like this. Or like this. There we go. All right, so we're in. And make sure my plastic piece goes into the load cell receiving slot or hole. And now it's just a matter of lining this up and getting our bolt back in. So I'll get the bolt started. And I'm looking straight down from the back. You can see this. And you could do it from the front too. But I'm looking from the back now. So I'm kind of looking straight down here. And I might have to compress it. Yeah, here's the thing. This is going to, I wonder if I'm going to go ahead and see if I can compress this a little bit. That's just going to give me more tension though. See, now I've got a harder spring in here, so it's not going to be as easy to compress it to get our bolt back in, right? Always something, isn't it? I'm going to go ahead and loosen it up because putting more pressure on it's not going to help me. So what I'm going to do is kind of take my fingers at the front here, 2 of them, and then grab the back of this lever section and just push on it so I can get it in there. That's the idea. I'll kind of bump it up to my chest too, so maybe that'll help things, brace things a bit better. All right, so here we go. Yeah, that wasn't too bad. Went in okay. And of course, we're just going to put our washer back on, put our nut back on, and we are done. And there's no tricks to this or gotchas. It's just pretty much straightforward, tightening the nut up while I'm holding the other side of the bolt. And just give it a good snug. Remember, this is a nylock bolt, or rather nut over here, so it's not going to go anywhere. And there we have it. That's the change. And of course, I can put some preload on that if I want to tighten it up, make it really stiff. It's definitely getting stiffer. All right, so this is how I'm going to run it because that's the default section or default situation that you're going to be in when you get it out of the box. If you don't have the optional upgrade kit, which I'm going to employ afterwards, along with a damper that I'm going to put in here because They sent the damper kit to me too. Saw that in the closer look, but we'll go over that in another segment. All right, so there are the adjustments for the brake pedal. Now we'll take a look at the adjustments in the clutch pedal. All the other adjustments are the same as on the throttle pedal, so go to the throttle pedal adjustment segment if you want to see that, if you haven't seen it already, as far as adjusting these stops under here, and of course the angle over here and things like that, and the pedal face. So what we're really concerned with on the clutch is this guy here, this cage back here, and it's kind of a squarish design there. And right now as it sits, as I push down on this, it's hard to push it first, and then it kind of locks up right about there. There it is. And it locks up right there. And then it's not hard to hold. But when you let go, it pops back at you like a real pressure plate will do, or pressure plate spring will do in a real clutch. And it does a pretty good job of that on the bench. Unfortunately, most of these things, when you get them in the cockpit and I'm slapping at the clutch pedal doing some heel and toe shifting, the feeling usually goes away. Now we can change how that feels by moving it up and down in this bracket that's supporting that. Now we can move it up and down in these holes, and they also have more of a fine-tuning section here to do that. Now I like what I'm feeling on this already. Plus, of course, we have a preload, so I can make that a little bit stiffer if I want to, just by adjusting the preload on that. It's got a nice knurled knob on it, just like everything else on this pedal set. Everything is just well done, the finish on everything and the way everything's engineered. Just top tier stuff here, it looks like. To do that, though, it is going to be a little tricky. First thing you want to do is take this loose. Now, I'm looking at their directions. Currently, directions don't say anything about changing this, but because you can, you know, they give you the slots and everything in there. They just haven't updated their PDF as of this review. All right, so now I have this very loose. You can see it's flopping around. That's what you want before you go in here and take these screws out. And to take them out, you're going to need an 8mm wrench. Now, the thing about it is, and you're going to need a 3mm on this side. But the thing about this is, see how they're kind of sitting in there recessed? It's a good way to show you the guys this. They're kind of recessed in here. So we've got kind of a milled out piece in there. So they're not sitting way out to where it's easy to get a hold of. But you can get it in here with a wrench kind of sideways a little bit and still get it in there and hold that while we're turning over here. That's the way I would do it. Kind of get a little sideways. Is least angle on it as I have to get it to lock on that little nut there. That's how I would do it. And then just take that off. Now you can also see that just like every other pivot point on this set, we have a metal sealed bearing in there on both sides. Again, good construction technique on all these pedals. So that's how you would adjust that. I like the way it feels right now, so I'm just not going to mess with it this time. And it's simple enough just to pull these out. It's going to take a little time, obviously, and it's going to be a little fiddly because of how those nuts are in there, but obviously it's doable. And yeah, so that's really about it as far as the clutch goes. Now, I do have a damper for this because they sent me the damper kit, and we'll be putting that in another segment when we're putting the dampers on the pedals. And yeah, that's it, though, for the stock clutch pedal. Now I'm going to install the damper kits into these pedals. And again, this is an accessory or optional kit that you can get. It's supposed to add some fluid feel to everything, which I really like, a damper sensation in a throttle. The brake, sometimes it's not moving enough to really do anything, but we'll see once we get there. But we're going to start it with the throttle here. It's pretty simple what we're going to do. You can see this is kind of a one-piece assembly here. Well, not really one piece. You can take it all apart. But these dampers have a threaded body on them. And we use this to set the distance on how far it's going to be in the back part of this, which already has threads in it, by the way, that are not being utilized. You can see that there. See the threads around that hole where the shaft is coming out? All right, so we're just going to pull this whole unit out as one piece, and then the idea is this one goes right back in the same way, except we're going to have to screw it in the back here. So let's see how that works out. First thing we're going to do is take the preload off of this spring because we don't want any tension on it as we're doing this. So I just loosen that up. Spring's flopping around. Everything's loose. Good deal. Now we have two set screws to loosen up. We have one in the front piece here that's acting like a rod end for the pivot point, and we have one back here. So let's go ahead and loosen those up. They're 2.5mm. You just have to loosen them up. You don't have to pull the grub screw or set screw, whatever you want to call it, all the way out, which you shouldn't have to. And now the idea is just to pull it out from the front and rotate it up. like this. Pretty easy. Now the whole thing should come out, I'm hoping. There we go. So this is the whole piece of just the normal throttle. And you can see this has got a little end piece here that's stepped. And the smaller diameter goes into where we just saw back here, where the threads are. So I'm going to put this aside. And again, I can show you that piece there. And that pivots on 2 sealed bearings. I think you can see those. Here's one on that side, and you can see the other side there. So again, throughout the construction of this, it's really nice to see all these metal sealed bearings. Now, what they want you to do is tilt this piece back like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull the spring assembly back off. Just want to make sure you don't lose that top piece. It's separate also, and that's there to capture the front of the spring. You can see how it's got that little step in it. It's right there. All right, so now we're just going to screw this in. Pretty simple. Not that bad of an operation. You can do this pretty quickly, actually, if you've done it a couple of times, which I haven't, but I can see where you could. Now, there is a spacer that comes with this throttle damper. And it's a little 3D printed piece. You can see it there. And this is a measuring unit, if you will, that I'm going to put on the back of here. And I'm going to measure until I see no more air gap in there. See how there's still a gap there when I press it down? It's almost there already. I just got lucky and got it almost where it needs to be. But what I want to do is keep turning that, because they know how far back this body has to be in the pedal. So that's why they provide that. I'm just going to keep turning it until it bumps into it. There it is. Now it's turning it. So now that I'm there, what I'm going to do is pull this off, put it somewhere so I can use it later on if I mess things up and want to change it around. Now we're going to have to go back to the set screw over here and tighten it down on the threads. Now this set screw, I believe, has a nylon end on it. Yes. Very nice. See that little nylon end? Now the reason that is there is so it won't crunch down on the threads on the damper's body. So we don't mess up the threads with just a regular steel when you kind of crunch down into them and then they get stuck a little bit. You can get it out and everything, but it's much better to do it this way. And just snug it up. It doesn't take a lot of pressure because remember you got that nylon piece there. All right, so once that's done, the idea is to take this piece and roll it all the way back against the block this way. And that's counterclockwise. You can see it there from the perspective in the video. Now, the only thing is, did I mess anything up to where I can't get this in? Now, next is going to be getting our spring back on. And of course, make sure you don't forget this guy, little retainer there for the spring. Now, this is under pressure, but I can push this back with my finger. So I'm going to push it back and then kind of at the same time twist that up and see if I can get this guy to go in there. There it goes. And I'm going to push it and make sure when I'm pushing it that this is loose enough that I'm not causing any obstruction down in this part as that piece is going in. I want to make sure it goes all the way in there as that tries to roll away. And it feels like it's in there. How I'll know for sure is to go ahead and take that set screw up here and go ahead and run it down. And if it goes all the way in, that means it's not all the way in there. But if I bottom out on something like that, then we're good to go. All right, so that should hold on to the piston. Okay, so now, so I got that wrong. This does not go all the way up against this. This is actually our tensioner adjustment. So I'm just spinning this clockwise, this perspective, and I'm trying to get this to rest up against there. There it goes. So now that's giving me my preload function that we had before. And this just kind of spins up against the top here, it seems. That's the way it's designed to do. Interesting. I would have thought they'd have something in here to kind of capture this, but they don't. I'm not sure how much pressure I want on this. Ooh, already. Already it's feeling much better. As far as, you have this, it's hard to explain. and it's kind of light right now. I'm going to want more than that on there. And of course, this is adjustable, by the way, to show you that. So we just turn this guy one way or the other, and it'll become harder or easier for us to put that on there. I'm not sure where I would want this. Kind of just as I'm doing it, I'm turning the damper. Well, that's real easy there. Yeah, it really improves the feel, to me anyway, of the throttle. This is a little bit too stiff. But I'll know better once I have it mounted on the cockpit and when I'm actually using it. So there you go. That was pretty easy, huh? And of course, I can add some more preload, take some preload off, depending on what I want to do as far as that spring tension when I'm first moving it. But yeah, you have to wait till you get this on the cockpit to find out for sure where that's going to be. And I'm going to do the brake next. Now we're going to put the damper in the brake. And what we have to do is take this off first. There's a couple things that we're going to look at, but I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way so we can look at everything else. So I'm going to have to remove this bolt, M5 bolt, which is a 4mm hex on this side and a nut on the other side. And that is an M8 nut with a nylock in it. Let's go ahead and do that first. And I'm also going to be changing the damper a bit. What's in the, I want that nut to get away. The spring, you see the red spring in there now. That's what I've been running, and it's still a little bit too soft for me. So I'm going to try something else while I'm doing this. Now, this is under pressure. I'm just going to take my thumb and kind of push back on this and grab the back of the lever here, the pedal lever with my thumb, just kind of push back on it. Take some pressure off and it comes right out. The bolt does. There you go. Easy enough. Now we should be able to pull the whole stack out. If you saw the brake adjustments, you already know this. Kind of tilt up and pull forward at the same time. Everything comes out as one piece. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take the red spring out. It's still a little bit too soft, and I'm going to use one of these hard spacers. See how that pans out. Okay, I'll put this to a side. Now, a couple of parts you got to be aware of here. First off, we have two dampers. And one is longer than the other. I'm going to hold the ends even, and you can see this guy is longer. And that goes to the clutch. And it's the same assembly process for the clutch as the brake, so I'm not going to duplicate it on the clutch, just show you the brake. Let's get this guy out of the way. And there's also this piece here that's threaded in the middle. I call it a yoke, little pivot yoke. And the body of these dampers are threaded. So this will actually thread on there, and there's a set screw there. So let me loosen this up. The set screw is, by the way, a 2.5mm as far as size. And then we can adjust this just by spinning it. And they give us a spacer like this, a 3D printed unit. And this fits right in here like this to space it out to where it should be against the mount that's up here in the lever. And they have a longer spacer for the longer one for the clutch. Other than that, everything's the same. Right. So, in the front of this lever, we have a piece that's in there. You can see it there, and it has the, just like everything else, the steel bearings in there. And this has two little holes in it. Now, one hole is to capture the piston of our damper. The other hole is to put a set screw in so that we can stop it from turning or moving around once we have it in there. And they give you some set screws for that. Let me put this on my wrench so it's easy to see. And they have a piece of nylon on them. And the reason that nylon is there is so we can torque down a little bit on this without crushing the threads on the body of our damper. I like that. Instead of just putting a metal one in there and crimping it down, yeah, that's good. And there's already one in this piece. They don't come installed in this one because they don't know if you're going to have the kit or not. So there is a threaded hole and a smooth hole. It's pretty easy to see them. You can see there's the threaded hole on the top. It's just a smoothie. They look about the same in diameter as that one's been threaded. So I'm just going to start this set screw in that threaded piece. If the threads are cut properly, and they seem like they are, it went in very easily. And now we have to mount to the back. And the back has two countersunk holes on each side of our brackets here. There and there. And what we end up doing is mounting this assembly. Now, Along with this yoke, we get 2 of these brackets for each one of these dampers. And they have the metal shielded bearings on each side. And we have some holes that we'll be screwing into. These holes actually have threads in them. And we have these flathead screws. They're going to do the job for us. Stainless steel. So what I'm going to do is really the only way to do it, because you have to go ahead and put these on here on the little yoke that I'm calling. And they very good fit, kind of a friction fit to these. So tolerances are very good here as far as the machining. Always like tight tolerances. What man wouldn't? All right, so now I've got to get these things in here in the body. Now, at first I thought I might have to loosen these bolts and give a little play between these plates here on the sides, but it looks like I'm going to be able to just get it in there. And also another consideration is, where do you want the set screw to be to adjust this? But once you have this in here and adjust it with a spacer, you should not have to adjust it anymore, right? So we'll just have to see how that works out. I'm going to leave it on the top, even though once I put that brake stack in there, I won't be able to access this anymore. Maybe I'll put it on the bottom. Then I can just get to it from the bottom. Seems like the best way to go, just in case. I can't even really think of a scenario I would need to, but why not if you can, right? Always good to leave access to something if you can when you're building it. Now, if we could just get the engineers that design motor cars these days to do that for oil filters and such, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Like it's really hard to get some of these parts inside of the cars. All right, so what I'm going to do is lay this on the side. That seems to be the best way to do this. And look straight down here. And the idea is to get my holes lined up on one side first. And go ahead and get my screws started. Is that 2.5? Is it 2.5? No, this is 3. Okay. 3 millimeter wrench size here. Like that. So I can see my holes are pretty close. I'm going to kind of push it a little bit towards the back of the room there. I think I might be able to get this started. There we go. Now, the other one doesn't naturally line up just because I have the other one started. So I'm going to look down here. I think that's got it right there. I'm just going to loosely snug it up. I'm not going to really torque down on it until everything's assembled. So we'll go and flip it on the other side and do the exact same thing if we are able. Oh yeah, that landed up nicely. Okay. So let's go ahead and get 2 more screws in. This is going easier than I thought it would. Okay. 1 more. And again, just giving it a little snug here to keep it firmly in place, but not the final tighten. So now the idea is to get this in there, right? Right now that is hard to push, which is not what I want. So I'm going to reach under here. In fact, I'm going to screw it down further so I can get my fingers on it. I'm going to have to loosen this up. That's another thing before you load these. You want to make sure that damper is on a soft setting so you don't have to kill your finger trying to push it in. So I'm going to adjust this dial on here until I can get it where it's easy. Maybe I'm going the wrong way here. There we go. Yeah, now it's easy to push in. Well, relatively easy anyway. Yeah, okay. So now all we have to do is get this tilted forward, which I can't do right now because I screwed it down to get access to the knob. There we go. Now I can tilt it forward. And get it in our hole up there. I'm going to screw it in so it goes back as far as I can get it. Actually, I'm not going to let it hit the load cell back here. You can see what I'm talking about. There's actually an indentation cut into it, a plate there that's holding the load cell for this. Now I'm going to push it in with my thumb, if I can do this little maneuver here. Kind of spin things together. There we go. I'm going to make sure I don't have the set screw in too far. I don't want to bind up on anything. It feels like it's pretty good there. All right, so it seems like it's gone into where it needs to be. And I'll know that when I tighten the set screw down inside of here. If it keeps going all the way in, that means it's not far enough in for me to catch it. And obviously that's what we want to do. We want to bump into that rod. And there it is. Nice. Just a snug. Remember, we're just kind of keeping it located at the end of the day. All right, so now we're going to use our spacer to get the room we need, according to them, as far as where that piston needs to be as far as the room. So I'm going to turn this right here until I see this bump into the top or the front of our little catch there, little swivel piece. So I'm just going to do that. I'm looking down, watching it. I want to get it real tight because, number one, I still have to pull this out. Just so it's touching. If I can pull it out, I should be good. So there's what I want as far as the setting on this for it to work properly according to the manufacturer. A little spacer tool got it all set up for us. Now I'm going underneath and tighten this up, the set screw that's in here. So this will not turn anymore. One thing about this is I can see already that to adjust this, you're going to have to pull the stack off to get your finger down here. Watch my wrench over there. Make sure it didn't get away. To get your fingers down here to be able to turn this thing. So not the most convenient way to adjust it, is it? So anyway, that's the design. All right, so it's spaced properly. We have all of our set screws tightened down properly. Leave the one access from the bottom. Take your spacer here or your spacer tool and put it somewhere. And now it's just a matter of getting back to work on our stack. And that's just putting this back in. I'm going to watch my orientation of my logo there. Keep it in the proper orientation. I'm going to kind of pivot this down and kind of twist it at the same time like that so it sets in like it should. We're going to get our bolt. Get that back in, just like we did in the, I've already shown you this in the brake adjustment segment. Get our nut back on and we should be right where we need to go. Now I am going to tighten this down now. And I'm a little loose here in my stack obviously, but that's because I took the spring out and put this solid piece in, but of course I can just preload it down. So it's nice and tight. This is probably going to be better for me. All right, so there it is as far as the damper in the brake. The clutch is the same thing. You just got to make sure you put the longer one in there. The same procedure as we did on the brake. Pretty simple, really. Let's take a look inside of the controller box and see what's in here. First, I've already pulled the top off, and this is all aluminum, as I said before in the closer look. This is a 3mm thick top piece here. We have some countersunk holes in there for our flathead screws and our etching to show what's doing what on the ports. Let's take a look at the box itself. It's a VNM simulation pedal version 1.0, made in Vietnam. You can see the etching up there on the top of it. Of course, it's their own custom proprietary board. And we see the usual suspects. We've got our inputs here. We've got our USB here providing the 5 volts to the board. And because of that, you can see we have our little power circuit in here with our smoothing capacitors, our transistor, and then we have an inductor over there. And then we have our little DFU switch here, or a switch that performs DFU, which puts it in boot mode. And over here, we have our 4 inputs. Now we have they're labeled up here as handbrake, throttle, brake, and clutch. You can see the labeling on there. I guess if I can turn it this way, you can see it, well, this way. See a little better. So we know which one's which. Now, also, if you take notice, these circuits servicing these inputs are all pretty much the same looking there, aren't they? Same design. But they're kind of a flexible design. So depending on whether we're using a load cell or we're using some other input device, we can configure it that way, or they can configure it that way. And in this case, we have the handbrake, which their handbrake has a load cell in it. And down here we have the brake. Of course, that has that 200 kilogram load cell from Mavin in it. So we need to amplify that circuit, or that signal rather, coming in. And we have 2 amplifiers sitting right here. And these are AD8223 ARZ amplifiers. So once we amplify it, then we send it over here to this. And this is a 24-bit chip right here. And that's doing the AD, or analog to digital conversion. And that's an ADS131 MO4 chip. And then you can see that because we don't have chips here and here on these inputs, because we have these contactless angle sensors that are on the pedals, and we'll look at that a closer look in a little bit. So you don't have to put the amplifier circuit, or the amplifier chip rather, on those circuits. And we also have some jumpers controlling that, and the jumpers are labeled 0 and then 3.3 volts. So if you look at that, I think you can see that. See, it says 0 and then 3.3 volts. So these jumpers will determine whether we're putting voltage on this or not. And you can see that these are in two different positions for our load cells. That means that these amplifiers obviously are going to need some current and power, so that's 3 volts that they get. Now, the sensors don't require that, so we're set in a different jumper position on these two controller, or rather circuits, so that they don't get the 3 volts. So a very flexible design here, so they can deploy this board in different applications by doing it this way. Pretty clever, I think. I like what I'm seeing here. You know, I don't know how anybody can complain about what they're doing here. Of course, the soldering is all professional. It's just industry standard stuff here. Yeah, I don't think we can really complain too much about this. And all of these pieces are 3mm, the casing here and the other cover on the bottom down there. So very clean layout. I don't know about you guys, but I like what I'm seeing here. So let's see how this contactless sensor system is working. Now, I went ahead and disassembled this. I did take the dust cover off, and this is also a 2mm thick piece of aluminum. It's not plastic. Very nice. Instead of, they could have just put plastic up here, but I like the fact that they're machining all their parts in-house more than likely and putting them on there. All right, so we have a magnet that is on the shaft here of our pivot point for the pedal. And it looks like there's a little cover on it, some kind of a 3D cover or something. But let's see, that's not a very good way to sense the magnet. It's all, I'm trying to find something that's steel, because that's stainless steel right there. It's, yeah, I can feel the magnetic. You can see how it's kind of hanging there. So we got a magnet in there. And of course, that means we have magnetic fields north-south and varying amounts of amplitude of that magnetic field as we turn it back and forth. So we need something to pick that up and translate it into something we can use as far as a signal, and that's what this is. So you can see they have their own little proprietary board here, and this would be the chip here that picks up the magnetic fields, can sense the change in the magnetic field, and of course it will take that and use it as a signal. Let's put it through some capacitors here, and goes through the other side of the board where we have our solder pads, and then send it over to the controller box. Very nicely done here, I think. I don't see any issues with this. Looks like a good professional job. I don't see any defects anywhere. Solder joints look good. We've got our heat shrink tape up here snugged up real close there to keep it from touching anything. So just a good job. Nice thick cable. Doesn't say anything about, I don't think there's any shielding on these cables. It's a U-green manufacturer cable. So they're just using a USB 2.0 cable apparently. So this is a 4-lead USB cable. But it does have a nice feel to it as far as, let's see if we can get this thing to focus one more time. There we go. So it does have a good stiff feel to it. And it does have that little cable management piece here that I went ahead and took that off so I could take the whole thing off. So of course this is just going to sit up here like this in front of the shaft. It's not going to be touching it, obviously, because that makes it contactless. And it's just basically a Hall effects type of a circuit and function here. So as soon as I turn this pedal or move this pedal, it's going to sense the change in the magnetic field, and then voila, we have our signaling that we need to control what we're doing with this particular pedal. Yeah, I think this is just following the theme of the rest of the VNM pedal set, that this is just a well-sorted and put together result here. So now looking at the assembled pedal base. It's a very simple matter to assemble this. It's 2 pieces of 40 series profile. And then we have these 1-piece brackets here that we will use to mount to the surface, whatever it happens to be. Mine's going to be a profile cockpit. And this is a 1-piece bracket that goes all the way the length here that also holds our heel tray. On the inside of this, we have these other brackets that go in also into that 40 series. You can see we have some bolts there. And it sandwiches with this guy here, the main plate. Just a little reinforcing bracket that they put in between there. And then we have these 2 holes here, and that's for mounting our electronic box, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then we have the heel tray over here, and you can see it's all the way down in the lowest slot. And I'm not sure the distance I'm going to have it at yet, but based on what I was doing a little testing with, I took the throttle pedal and put it on here, and the height of where my heel is going to be when it addresses this plate over here. Let's go ahead and turn this around. I was putting my shoe up there, just guesstimating where it needs to be. And that seems to, of course, it will be over here once I have it mounted. So that seemed about right. I may change my mind once I get over there and I'm using the pedals. I might want to come up a little higher, but I'm not sure. And remember, we do have an adjustment in the pedal itself. I can actually raise that up if I need to. Can't go much lower, but I can actually raise it up. So again, not sure how this is going to work out until we actually get over there. Now remember, we have the controller box here that we're plugging everything into, and it has two sets of holes here, and those are M6 holes, and they are threaded. And it allows us to put the controller, I think I'm going to have it going, let's see, the pedals are going to be facing this way. I'll probably have it faced, I'm not sure, because the USB is this way. Usually I want the USB pointing towards the computer. I might have it going this way, which would be putting it on this side. And that's what these two holes are for, right here. They give us 4 bolts, M6s, that will go into this, and this will just sit here like so on those 2 holes. See if they're lining up here. Okay, yeah. So they're lining up there. So that's how it's going to be mounting to the side. Nice convenient little place to keep it out of the way, keep it out of harm's way. And of course you could put this somewhere else if you wanted to. And I'm not sure where I'm going to end up with it yet. So we'll figure that out once we get it all mounted up, which I'll be doing next. I'm going to go ahead and mount all my pedals to this. Then we're going to take it over to the rig, get it mounted on the pedal base there, and see how it all looks. So here's the pedal set mounted to my cockpit. Pretty straightforward affair here. Just the standard stuff. A couple of M8 bolts on each side of our base. And one thing while we're here, the brake pedal, I've changed that configuration from the 2 whites, and I think it was the 2.5 millimeter spring. Tried a few things and ended up with this. The heavy red spring and a green Vibroflex. I might still put the solid plastic spacer in place of the spring. I like a stiff pedal, and this seems to be okay, and it might do, but I really don't know until I'm really driving hard. But the first initial impressions were way too soft. I had to go ahead and put that in there. Okay. Other than that, everything's fine. We have the USB communication box over here mounted, and it's mounted to the base. Mounted up fine with some socket head caps in there. A little close on this side for the ring that plugs in and tightens down on the connectors, but not that bad. It still moves. Just have to take some care when you put it in there. Also, the clutch and the throttle cables, I'd like to see them as long as the brake cable, which is about 50, 60 more millimeters, because they work, but they're just a little short. And you know, they get the job done and everything, but I like to see them all the same length, just in case you want to spread them out or you have to do some kind of a strange mount or something. Nice to have a little bit more length. Other than that, everything's working fine. So all we have to do now is get in the cockpit and have some fun. So now we're in the VNM configuration software, and we are on the pedals tab. There's also a tab for wheelbase, some hardware, shifter, handbrake, but we're not dealing with any of that. So we're just going to focus on the pedal. So here we go. Device, we've already got VNM pedal selected, but that's the only device it sees because that's all that's plugged in. We're looking at the throttle currently in our drop down. We can select whichever axis we want. And we have some hex numbers over here too. All right, so if I want to calibrate the throttle, I would simply go over here and pick throttle, obviously, and hit calibrate. And then I would push the pedal all the way down. I would release it, and I'd say finish. So now the throttle should be calibrated. So let's see what goes on. Here we go. You can see how also we got this cool curve thing going down here in this window where we can come in and set up different curves. And we'll go over that in a minute. All right, so it's now calibrated. And I have it set up to where I can rest my foot on the pedal So there's a dead zone in here. I'm going to correct that right now. I'm going to hit the save down here in this dead zone setup. And now when I just rest my foot on the pedal, it shows some signaling. So I don't want that. So I'm going to go in here in the throttle and I'm going to play with that until I don't see it anymore. And it's kind of not as intuitive as I like it to be. I like it just to be, I could rest my pedal like this, or my foot on the pedal rather, and then take the throttle slider and go up here and get rid of the dead zone and see that concurrently up here when I'm doing with the slider, but that's not how it works. You just have to kind of guesstimate a little bit. My foot's resting on the throttle, and then I hit save. Take my foot off the throttle. And now when I rest it, it's barely showing up. So that was set right now at 52.42. So I go up just a hair more. Whoops, it slipped back. Try that. Click save. All right, so now, yeah. Now I can rest my foot on the throttle. If I'm driving, that's the whole idea behind this. If I go to my brakes and I'll let go of the throttle, sometimes my foot will rest on the throttle and you'll actually be applying throttle when you don't want to. So that's just something to watch. In the brake, I'm resting my foot on that. I've already got that configured the way I want to in the clutch too. So remember, it really doesn't show what's going on in real time up here when you're doing your dead zone adjustments. So you just have to save it and then you can see where it is after you do that. So my clutch doesn't engage until I really put some purpose pressure on it. Because a lot of times going down straights, I'll have the throttle down all the way and my foot will be over here in the clutch just resting, and I don't want to activate the clutch, obviously. Now you can also do this in game depending on the game you have, set your own dead zones in there. So you could also go down and calibrate the brake now. You can see it's ready to calibrate by this little blue line that went across the bottom here. And then I would just push it down to where I think I want it to be when I'll be using it. But you have to calibrate before you do it, obviously. Let's try that again. You can see the numbers moving here, but I don't see the bar moving, so it's all by feel at this point. And I'll hit finish. And now it'll calibrate and go all the way to the end when I give it full brake. And of course, we see what's going on in real time here in our graph. I'm going to go in and just for the heck of it, do the clutch again. Clutch, hit calibrate. Oops, I think I hit too quick. My little blue line stopped. So let's try it again. Yeah, it's doing crazy stuff now. So I'm going to hit calibrate. Go ahead and push the clutch all the way down. Let go. Hit finish. Wait for it to clear. And now my clutch is calibrated. Pretty simple stuff here. Now, we'll go over and look at the presets you can do. And of course, it depends on which pedal that you're picking here. Right now I'm on clutch. Here's the throttle. Here's the brake. And you can see this little blue line loading that axis. That's what that's doing. And it's got some presets. I can come in here and do like a sine wave on the brake. I can come in and do exponential 1 and 2. So it doesn't brake as hard when I first put on the brake pedal. This is showing me what's going on with the brake pedal all the time there. It looks like that doesn't really change with the curves. We'll go to 2. It's going the other way. So not as much brake at the end. So if you're always locking up your brake and you can't control that with your foot, then you can always put a curve in there and let that do it for you. Sine wave 2, that's pretty crazy. All right, so also when you're in here, you can click on one of these points and you can change it up or down. So it is a fine-tuned availability here if you want it. So I'm going to go back to linear. I'm going to go back to sine 1 and see it went back to stock. So unless you save it, it won't change anything forever. I'm always linear on all my pedals. Brake, clutch, and throttle. Linear, linear, linear. Because my foot is the curve. My ankle is the curve. I don't really use the software stuff. I mean, it's great that it's there if you think you need it and you can use it to your advantage. That's great. But I just don't use any of this stuff. All right, so those are our presets. And of course, you can make your own. You can save them. That's what all these are about. You can edit a certain one. Let me put sine 1 back up here. Let's see, linear, hit plus. You can actually add your presets there and change things in this curve and save it. I'm not going to do that. Leave it where it is. All right. And of course, you got to go over here and save everything. So this is pretty simple. What we're doing here is calibration. Then we can put our dead zones in. Even though I'd like to be able to watch what the dead zone's doing as I'm doing it. Yeah, that would be nice. there it is. I'm going to make sure I save everything after I'm in here. And that's it. Pretty simple stuff here. Doesn't go too deep, which I don't think it really needs to, but you know, some people might want more controls to play with. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and get in and do some driving now. So here's some of the first footage of testing with the pedals. I have the red spring in and the brake kit. The stock setup with the 2 white bumpers, even with the heavier spring, the 3mm thick spring, just didn't do it for me at all. It was just way too soft. And I decided to put the accessory kit in right away because I really just couldn't drive with it that way. I'm used to a very stiff pedal, so. And this obviously is very subjective stuff, so someone else might love it that way. And I even went to something else that we'll see later on. So overall feel the pedals, as soon as you bolt them down and you're actually driving with it, they have a good sturdy feel to them, as you might imagine, with these very thick 8mm aluminum side plates and a very beefy pivot point there. It's just no flex at all underfoot. If you see any movement, that's because I'm sitting on a suspension chassis right now and it's kind of moving around in its cups when I'm throwing my weight around. But from my perspective, nothing's moving, obviously, because I'm sitting in the cockpit, the same cockpit that the pedals are bolted to. So the throttle, let's talk about that. I like the throw on this throttle. It felt good as soon as I got in and started using it. It is kind of a longish throw, as you can see how far I'm pushing it back and forth. But having that much movement in your throttle does give you a good degree of modulation capability, which you do need in this car. And this is a Holden Australian Super V8 car. These things are notoriously tough to drive. They just have so much power and so little grip that it's really hard to get that power down when you're coming out of a corner. So this was a good test for these pedals, especially the throttle pedal. The brake pedal in this configuration, again, like I said before, didn't do it for me, and I ended up putting in a spacer, and it got as hard as I could, and you'll see that later on as we talk about it here. But the brake pedal in general, the brake pad is plenty of room on there. It's hard to miss it. It's almost a little bit too big for my personal preference, but again, subjective. But it does have plenty of room on it if for a person who's driving with, you know, just doing a 2-foot drive, you know, your left foot braking. And here we see, actually, I have the spacer put in. I took the spring out and put the solid spacer in. It feels much better for me at this point. But yeah, the brake pedal's big pad. Again, I can stomp on it really good. Now that it's stiff the way I like it, it's not moving a whole lot. Again, it's just very firm underfoot, gives good tactile feedback. As you might imagine, if you've watched how these things were constructed during the review so far, then yeah, it's just easy to see why they're doing what they do. The clutch, the feeling of the pressure plate spring, like most of them, kind of went away as I'm jamming on everything and just kind of poking at it when I'm doing my downshifts. So yeah, that's typical of a clutch pedal though. But it did do its job again, just as firm as the rest of the pedals as far as banging on it. Didn't feel weak, didn't feel flexy. And that's important, I think, when you have a set of pedals underfoot, is how they feel to you as far as stiffness, because they can relate a lot of information to you if they're stiff. If they're flexing or your base is flexing, it kind of dampens this information that's available underfoot. I did not use any of the curves that are available in their software. I just don't do curves. I just use my feet and my ankles for curves. But if a software curve helps you drive faster and more consistent, then yeah, by all means, use it. Overall, you know, I really don't have too many complaints about this pedal. I would like to see maybe another green bumper included in the upgrade kit for the brake accessories that you can get. The damper, again, on the brake pedal, it's such a stiff setting that I have it at now, I can't feel it. There's no way that I don't think anyone could feel it. It's just not moving far enough to actuate it. Now, when we go over to the throttle pedal, yeah, you feel it there. The damper on the throttle pedal, any throttle pedal that has a damper in it, I've always enjoyed because it gives you more of an analog feel, at least it does for me, on the stroke of the pedal. And these being gas charged too, they're pushing back at you. And of course the spring is doing that also, the preload spring. So do you really need it gas pressurized pushing back at you? Again, you know, that's subjective. It depends on what you like. But it kind of feels the same to me. As long as you have a strong enough spring pushing back, it doesn't matter if it's in the damper or if it's in the preload spring. I'm not sure I could really tell the difference of that, but when you push it down, that damping just gives you a fluid motion. It feels like you can feather the throttle exactly. In other words, the tactile feedback just feels very analogish. It doesn't feel digital. And that's a big thing for me. I try to feel like, or get something to feel like it's analog and it's a natural thing. And it's very hard to do in simulation, obviously. But I can tell you, with the brake pedal set up like this, I was able to brake much better. And I was able to trail brake. My threshold transition from threshold to trail braking was good. Not as good as the pedal set that I use every day, but I think if I had a couple of weeks to tune this and maybe some other bumpers to choose from, I might be able to get it there. As far as stiffness, it's there. But yeah, it's real hard for me to get a pedal that feels like I'm really transitioning from that threshold to the trail braking moment as I start my turn in. And it's not easy for me to get a brake pedal to feel like that, but I got it very close here with this one in this setup. Well, anyway, I was able to pretty much drive the same lap times that I always do, and that's how I usually gauge the success or failure of something that I'm using as far as a pedal set goes. What else can we say about the pedal set? That's about it. I mean, it's either does it or it doesn't do it. Kind of, there's no failures here as far as I can see. They've done a pretty good job here. Their engineering, it looks like they put a lot of hours in the product development stages here because they got most of this stuff right. I can't see too many things to complain about, except maybe some more adjustability in that brake pedal would be nice. They've nailed the throttle, especially with the damper. It's a shame they don't include the damper with the kit, but you have to buy that separate, and I think it's like $160 for that set of dampers. And I could live without the damper on the clutch and on the brake pedal. I just want it for the throttle. But you can't get it that way. It comes as a set. At least at the time that I'm making this video, it does. But yeah, I really liked it on the throttle. Really improved that feel, in my eyes anyway, because of the way I drive and what I want to feel. Anything else I can complain about? It's not really. It's just a good, solid set of pedals at the end of the day. And it gets the job done and gives you consistent lap times. And that's what we're all striving for, something that gives us the ability to do consistent, repeatable lap times. And a brake pedal is very, very important in that part. And of course, throttle is like second in importance to me anyway, for being able to get out of that turn and get on that throttle and feather it as you need and apply that throttle as you need coming out of a turn successfully. And being able to do that repeatedly, you have to feel that under your foot. At least I do. So that's about it for the driving segment. Final thoughts on the VNM Sim Racing 3-pedal set. Out of the box, this set presents very well. I could find no defects in the fit or the finish. The pedals are constructed from CNC aluminum and finished with black anodization. The plates are over 8 mm thick on the sides and 6 mm thick most everywhere else. All pivot points are supported by sealed bearing units. All fasteners are stainless steel. The pedals have a good amount of adjustments to them, and this should give the user enough range to dial in their preferred positions. The clutch and throttle angle sensors are of a contactless Hall sensor design, which should give long life cycles. The USB conversion board sports a 24-bit analog to digital conversion feature on what looks to be a well-sorted, flexible circuit design. The brake pedal has a Mavin 200 kg load cell for pressure sensing duties. VNM also offers 2 upgrade kits for their pedal set, a brake upgrade kit and a damper upgrade kit. I was able to use the brake kit to tune the pedal enough to allow me to perform consistent braking during threshold braking. However, I wasn't able to get it where I like during the crucial threshold to trail braking transitions. Of course, this is a very subjective thing, and others may find it sufficient for their needs. A damper kit does add a smoother, more analog feel to the pedals. I found it to be most effective on the throttle pedal because of its long stroke when compared to the brake pedal's short stroke. I had the brake pedal set up as stiff as I could, so it did not really move enough for me to sense the difference. The clutch pedal damper did provide a different feel, but not as definitive as on the throttle pedal. I would like to see VNM offer the dampers individually, so customers don't have to pay for something they may not feel is necessary. Using the pedals provided a good solid experience when mounted to their baseplate and in turn mounted to a solid pedal tray. Good tactile feedback underfoot that provided me with enough information to feel like I was controlling the car. I pounded on this set pretty good, and it did not show any areas of weakness. I struggled to find any real issues with the VNM Simulations pedal set. I could nitpick about wanting more range in the elastomer selection provided, or allowing customers to choose the dampers they wanted instead of paying for the whole set. But as far as build quality and the parts used here, I think most would agree VNM has done a good job with this pedal set. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.